Do you have bad landings? I know I do. Landing an airplane is just one of those things. You can do it 500 times a year and still kinda suck at it. Few people get to review their landings from as many camera angles as I do, and I think I've really learned a lot from that. For instance, earlier this year, I straight up forgot how to land for a period of about 2 months, and those are all the landings that you've seen featured here. As you've heard on our favorite TV shows like Air Crash Investigation and Seconds from Disaster, it's never just one thing that causes the main event. It's always a series of events that lead up to it. So let's review the series of events that led up to me forgetting how to land. It all started in my trip to Australia this winter. I rented a Warrior while I was down there, but hadn't flown mine in over 2 months. When I came back, I decided that it would be fun to start training in the right seat and taking some very trusted passengers to fly in the left, thus having to relearn my landings from the right seat. While relearning my landings from both the right and the left seat, I got into thinking, wow, I must be a much better pilot than I used to be. I have 300 landings under my belt. I bet I can land like my instructor used to. But if your instructor is anything like my instructor, they were perfect, almost robotic in what they did. They could stay at traffic pattern altitude for safety up until short final, drop 3 notches of flaps, and then touch down at even beyond VSO. Well, it turns out that's not how I used to like to land. My instructor would always pull the airplane back up after landing and say, look, you have energy to fly another 200 feet, you're going too fast. Now, it's always stuck with me, so much so that I can hear that in my sleep, and it probably makes me a better pilot, but it's just not how I like to land. And I'm a huge believer that everybody has a specific way they like to fly an airplane. So for me, when I started trying to land that way, I had a horrible landing guaranteed almost every single time. So what did I do to fix this? If you've been watching my recent videos and seen my trip around the Cape, those landings got progressively better as the trip went on, because that was my first time to stop and really think about my flying, and I realized I like to land with a little bit more throttle and a little bit flatter approach, and cut the power right over the threshold and glide it down. So that's what I started doing again, landing like I wanted to. Now, as long as there's nothing horribly wrong with your training, this is perfectly safe, and I would highly recommend it, because it guarantees you a landing that you'll be happy with every time. Now, I'm sure other pilots go through phases of being happy with their flying or happy with their radio work, and then suddenly one day you screw up and it's not so peachy keen anymore. But I couldn't figure out if it was the weather, was winter messing up my landing somehow. You'd like to think that winter would be smoother than landing in the summer with all that turbulent air. But what I found out was that your landings really have nothing to do with the time of year or whether the sun's in your eyes, but it's all about you and whether you feel comfortable making that landing and approach. I found out for myself that I started making my approaches way too steep, way too fast, and it just ended up with a bad landing. My style, personally, is to have a much flatter approach with power on and a smooth round out to flare. Think of it as much the style of landing an airliner. And there's a reason for that too, which is that I usually fly with a heavily loaded airplane because I take lots of people flying with me. So, therefore, the loading more resembles an airliner, that it's more to the aft, which would be difficult to land if you were thinking about it like a flight school plane that only has 1 or 2 passengers. I even went so far as to put markers on my yokes and do image analysis on my landings, thus converting them into numbers that I could analyze later. It had some pretty interesting results, but that pertains to a future project that you'll see in videos to come.
Oral warning test B.
But if anyone asks, you never saw that. Anyway, I hope my analysis of how I forgot how to land helps you guys out too in your training. If my fellow pilots out there have any similar stories about your flight career, please leave them in the comments below and let us know what you did to improve your landings. That's it for today, folks. We'll see you again next time on the Friendly Skies channel.